thinking about taking the plunge and launching your own thing.
Yeah.
You've got that initial spark, that vision.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the sheer volume of information out there can feel, well, overwhelming.
Totally.
Consider this deep dive, your cheat sheet, the distilled essentials for getting your business and startup off the ground, just the critical insights you need to cut through the noise.
Exactly. We've dived deep into a comprehensive briefing document and also a textbook focused specifically on commercializing innovation.
Okay.
Our goal here is really to extract the core knowledge, the actionable principles that will serve as your bedrock for building a successful venture.
All right, so where does it all begin? With an idea, right? Seems obvious.
Well, yes, but our sources make a really crucial distinction here. There's a real gulf between just a fleeting thought and a genuine business opportunity.
How so?
Well, one of the sources, the textbook, it shows some traditional places people look for tech commercialization ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Internal research, licensed patents, spotting market needs.
Standard stuff.
Right. But just stumbling upon an idea in one of these areas isn't really enough to build a whole business on.
So it needs more.
That's right. A true opportunity needs to be rigorously vetted for its potential. We're talking about looking hard at the financial viability, the potential impact it could actually have, and so on.
Okay.
It's not just whether an idea sounds good in the moment. It's really about whether it has the legs to become a sustainable, profitable business.
And what actually sparks those solid opportunities? Is it just luck?
Not entirely. Our sources highlight something called entrepreneurial alertness. There's an article by Andy Civilli, Cardozo, and Ray from 2000 that discusses this. It's about actively tuning your mind to spot possibilities.
Like a skill you can develop.
Pretty much.
Huh.
Interestingly, Robert Kern and the Kern Family Foundation really emphasize fostering this entrepreneurial mindset, particularly in engineering students, training them to see opportunities where maybe others wouldn't. And what's fascinating is that this ability to recognize opportunities isn't just luck, like you said. It is a skill. And the first hurdle, what our textbook calls the first gate, is making sure that any potential project really aligns with your overarching vision or goals for the business.
Ah, the vision thing. Makes sense.
Yeah, if an idea doesn't fit with where you ultimately want to go, it's probably unlikely to get the necessary focus and, resources down the line.
Right. Focus is key. But when you've got a team maybe buzzing with ideas, how do you actually narrow things down? It can get messy.
It can. The book uses this neat analogy comparing it to distillation in chemistry, separating a complex mixture to get the pure valuable components.
Okay, I like that. Filtering it down.
Exactly. There's even a sample model shown for how you might structure this opportunity recognition process. That distillation process helps you refine a large pool of initial ideas into a more manageable set of really promising projects.
Bringing some order to the chaos.
Precisely. It's about bringing some structure. However, it's also really vital to not completely discount your intuition, that sort of gut feeling.
Definitely. That's where some real breakthroughs can come from, right?
Absolutely. The book even mentions the automotive industry and how sometimes unexpected innovations, like, say, the Toyota Prius back in the day, emerge from kind of outside the traditional way of thinking.
So it's a balance then. Analysis and instinct.
Exactly. A mix of both.
Yeah.
And to further evaluate these potential opportunities, our sources suggest asking some really pointed questions.
Like what?
What's your organization's past success rate with new ventures? How dynamic and competitive is the market you're looking at? Are there external pressures forcing a need for change? And critically, are your existing resources actually a good fit for this opportunity?
Good reality checks. Okay, so let's say you've got a potential opportunity that, ticks those boxes so far. What's the next critical step?
Well, our sources introduce feasibility analysis as the second major gate. This is where you really put the idea under the microscope to see if it can actually work in practice.
Feasibility. Makes sense. How does that break down?
Feasibility analysis is basically all about assessing the likelihood of success. It broadly splits into two main areas. First, looking at the opportunity itself.
Yeah.
The size of the potential market, who your competitors are, the state of the technology involved, any relevant trends.
The external factors.
Right. And second, it's about evaluating how ready your organization or project team is to actually execute.
The internal side, what does that involve?
Well, things like your financial health, your available cash, obviously the skills and availability of your team, and those significant investments in things like physical space, equipment.
The practical stuff.
Exactly. The book specifically highlights plant, equipment, and finding the right people as long lead items, things you absolutely need to start thinking about early on.
Got it. Long lead items. Plan ahead.
Absolutely. And woven into this whole feasibility assessment is a thorough look at potential risks. Our sources detail several key categories here.
Okay, risk assessment. Crucial. What kind of risks?
Well, first, there's technology risk. This involves protecting your intellectual property IP through things like patents and copyrights.
Right, protecting your secret sauce.
Exactly. And sometimes licensing existing technology can actually be a faster way to get to market. We saw that with the example of Phoenix Controls licensing technology from MIT.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. They got a jump start by licensing, right? Which got them selling much quicker.
Precisely, it gave them rapid market entry. Interestingly, though, the book points out that later on, that initial license tech actually made up less than 5% of their revenue.
Huh. So the real win was the speed and the brand.
Seemed to be, yeah. Market entry and recognition. And speaking of patents, the book mentions different types, like provisional patents that give you an early filing date, and utility patents, which offer broader protection. It also touches on the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the PCT for filing internationally, though that can get quite costly.
Okay. What are the risks?
Then we have legal risk, which mainly revolves around making sure you're not stepping on someone else's IP toes and protecting your own branding. Governance risk touches on the responsibilities of a company's board of directors, especially around financial accountability. Sarbanes-Oxley really emphasized that.
Even for startups.
Well, the principles apply: transparency, accountability, and of course, financial risk. Carefully managing your cash flow to avoid running out of money is paramount. That's a huge hurdle for so many startups.
Definitely. Cash is king, as they say.
It really is. Then there's commercial risk, which is all about actually selling your product or service. The book mentions the Miller-Hyman strategic selling approach. It involves understanding the different people involved in a purchasing decision. Like, you've got the technical expert, the technical buyer, and the person holding the purse strings, the economic buyer. They have different priorities you need to address.
Tailoring the pitch. Makes sense.
Understanding those different perspectives is really key to closing deals. Finally, there are regulatory risks. These can be very significant, particularly in certain industries. Think pharmaceuticals with long FDA approval cycles, or areas governed by workplace safety rules from OSHA.
Right. Red tape can be a killer.
It can certainly slow things down or add costs. Even though Sarbanes-Oxley was mainly for bigger companies, its principles, as I said, are valuable for startups too.
Okay, wow. So you've identified a promising opportunity, you've done your homework on feasibility and risks. Now it's time to actually get it out there, go into market.
Exactly. And our sources emphasize that marketing isn't just about broadcasting information out. It's really a two-way flow of communication. There's a figure in the book that illustrates this interaction between sales and marketing quite well.
Two-way flow. Meaning,
marketing also provides essential insights back into the business. What competitors are doing, what customers genuinely think of your product, broader market trends.
market intelligence.
Precisely. And the digital age has just fundamentally changed marketing, hasn't it? Analyzing data, understanding online customer behavior, like how Amazon uses your history for recommendations, that's become incredibly important.
Yeah, data's everything now. And then there's pricing. That's always a tricky one.
Crucial element. The book covers several common strategies. There's cost-based pricing, where you basically calculate your costs and add a desired profit margin. You need to factor in your break-even point.
How much you need to sell just to cover costs.
Right. And the experience curve concept suggests your per unit costs tend to decrease as you produce more, which can influence cost-based pricing over time.
Okay, what else?
You also have competition-based pricing, where you're mainly looking at what your rivals are charging. Then there's value-based pricing, which is particularly useful for innovative or complex products. Here, the price is driven more by the perceived benefit to the customer, not just your costs.
So what it's worth to them.
Exactly. The book also briefly mentions other strategies like absorption pricing, contribution margin pricing, and price skimming. Lots of options depending on the situation.
It feels like it's all connected, doesn't it? Competition and actually bringing your product to market are intertwined.
They absolutely are. The book even touches on the perspectives of thinkers like Marx, Smith, Schumpeter on competition's role in the economy. But from a startup's point of view, it highlights 3 key ways competition actually benefits society.
Interesting.
And for you, as a new business, having a clear competitive strategy is just vital. You need it for learning from and responding to rivals, whether that's through how you design your product families, your marketing tactics, or even just doing a good old SWOT analysis.
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Classic.
Yep. Understanding where you stand relative to the competition. Ultimately, though, so much of this boils down to the numbers, your financial planning.
Oh, the money part. Always critical.
Our sources really stress the critical need to closely manage your capital, especially in those vulnerable early stages. A well-thought-out financial model is absolutely essential for managing the inevitable ups and downs of cash flow.
And there's some key financial metrics you really need to get your head around, right?
Definitely. There's return on investment, or ROI, though the book notes it has some limitations. There's internal rate of return, IRR, which helps you compare the potential returns of different projects side by side.
Okay.
And net present value, or NPV. That helps you understand the current value of future cash flows, bringing those future projections into today's terms.
So, like, is this future profit worth the investment now?
Exactly. NTV helps answer that by considering the time value of money. Budgeting is also fundamental, obviously. It's crucial to integrate the budgets for individual projects with your overall company financial plan.
Right. It all needs to tie together.
And the income statement, often called the IS, becomes a vital tool here. It shows your total revenue and all your expenses, both fixed costs and those that vary with activity.
Got it. Revenue in, expenses out.
You'll also hear about cost of goods sold, COGS. That includes the direct costs of producing whatever you sell, materials, direct labor, manufacturing overhead.
Okay.
Then there are sales, general, and administrative expenses, SGA. That covers things like your sales team, marketing, R&D, and general admin costs.
The overheads.
Pretty much. And you'll encounter terms like EBITDA earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization, and of course, net income, your bottom line profit after everything.
The final number.
The book really emphasizes creating a detailed cash flow model. It even provides a template income statement you can adapt and discusses using something called man loading per month as a way to estimate salary expenses.
Man loading.
Sounds complex.
It's just a way to project headcount costs month by month. Finally, it briefly touches on the role of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, in defining things like securities and ownership structures. Okay, lots to track on the financial side. But it's not just about money, is it? What about the people and the structure?
Absolutely not. Organizational dynamics are crucial. You need the right people in the right roles, the right structure, and the right place, physical or virtual, right from the start. There's a figure in the book showing how team roles tend to evolve as a company grows.
Things change as you scale up.
They do, and establishing the correct legal structure is foundational. Forming a corporation, which the book notes comes from the Latin corpus, meaning body, creates a separate legal entity that's distinct from the founders.
Limits personal liability, usually.
Generally, yes. That's often the most common structure, but there are different organizational models you can consider too, like a functional structure, grouping people by skills, or maybe product-based or market-driven structures.
Which one's best?
Well, the best choice really depends on several factors. Your company's stage, its size, the technical expertise needed, leadership style, communication needs, external resources you rely on.
So it's context dependent.
Very much so. And importantly, your structure needs to be flexible, pliable, able to adapt as you grow. Using a balanced set of metrics linked directly to performance goals and action plans is essential for managing effectively, no matter which model you pick.
Okay, makes sense. Now let's circle back to funding, securing funding. We touched on cash flow, but where does the initial capital actually come from?
Right. Our sources outline a whole range of potential capital sources. It could be internal funds, bootstrapping initially, then maybe angel investors, venture capital, and eventually even going public.
So it's a spectrum. What about the very beginning?
In the very early days, many startups rely on what's often colorfully called FFF, friends, family, and fools.
Heard that one.
And bootstrapping, which just means funding the business yourself, maybe out of savings or early revenues. Angel investing has become much more formalized now.
How so?
Well, you have angel investor groups with screening committees that evaluate pitches, startups give formal presentations, there's due diligence where they check you out thoroughly, and then negotiation of term sheets. There's a figure illustrating this typical angel process.
Term sheets. Those are the deal terms, right?
Exactly. Key terms you'll find include the amount of money being raised, the price per share of equity they're buying, and liquidation preferences.
Liquidation preferences.
Yeah, that dictates who gets paid back first if the company is sold or liquidated. As Nicholas Carlson once pointed out, these often favor the investors. The National Venture Capital Association, the NVCA, actually provides standardized templates for many of these deal documents, which helps.
Okay, and then there's venture capital VC. How's that different from angels?
Well, Georges Doriot is often called the father of VC. The key difference is that VC firms primarily invest other people's money, big pools of capital from institutions, pension funds, wealthy individuals. Their investment decisions are usually made by a team, not just one person. They typically invest larger amounts than angels, and while they seek high growth, they might be slightly more risk-averse than some very early-stage angels.
Looking for bigger, more established potential, maybe?
Often, yes. The sources show the impact of the dot-com bubble bursting on VC activity, and also how VC and angel investing have kind of converged somewhat over time in terms of deal structures. Beyond these, you also have institutional investors, like pension funds directly, plus government and foundation grants like SBIR and STTR programs.
Lots of avenues for funding, then.
Depending on your stage and type of business, yes. But once you're up and running, you inevitably encounter the complex world of navigating the landscape, which includes both government regulations and, of course, your competition.
Ah, yes, regulations again.
Our sources really emphasize this significant, sometimes quite invasive, impact that government regulations can have. Think OSHA for safety, EPA for environment, FDA for health products, IRS for taxes, SEC for securities. It's a long list. There's a figure showing just a partial list of these government relationships.
It's a minefield.
It can feel like it. And nowadays, you're operating globally. You're competing for resources, capital, talent, manufacturing, even government support on a worldwide scale.
No hiding anymore.
Not really. Companies really need to be, as the book says, nimble and adaptive to succeed. Interestingly, global R&D spending is shifting. Asia is now outpacing the U.S. in R&D investment, according to forecasts.
Wow.
On a more local level, though, don't forget resources like the Small Business Administration, the SBA. They offer help through programs like SCORE mentorship, small business development centers, women's business centers. Those can be invaluable.
Good local support is key.
Absolutely. It's also worth noting, sadly, that early-stage companies can sometimes face a disproportionately heavy burden from regulatory compliance compared to larger firms.
Yeah, fewer resources to deal with it all.
Exactly. Looking ahead now, new trends are constantly reshaping this whole landscape.
Like what? What's changing?
Well, crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter, remember the Pebble Watch success story, they've emerged as a really significant alternative source of funding for many startups. There's a figure showing this rise.
Democratizing funding, in a way.
You could say that. Incubators, too, both physical and virtual, play a huge role in nurturing startups through those fragile early stages. The history of incubators goes back quite a way, actually.
Providing support and community.
Right. And as we've mentioned, global competition just keeps intensifying. You see increasing R&D investment in Asia, a huge rise in patent applications coming out of China, for example. There's something called the Total Early Stage Entrepreneurial Activity, or TEA Index, that tracks these global activity levels.
So the pace isn't slowing down.
Not at all. And finally, the world of intellectual property itself is evolving. You've got the rise of collaborative technologies challenging traditional IP models. And then there's the emergence of so-called patent trolls.
Ah, the trolls. Not good.
No, these are companies that acquire patents not to build things, but purely to sue other companies for infringement. Figures in the book highlight this trend and its negative impact on actual innovation.
Damping effect.
Definitely. Organizations like WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and international agreements like TRIPS are trying to navigate these complex and changing issues.
Wow. Okay, so putting it all together, it's quite a journey.
It really is. As you can see, launching a business is this incredibly multifaceted endeavor. It involves carefully identifying viable opportunities, rigorously assessing their feasibility, having a strategic approach to the market, managing finances meticulously, building the right team and structure, securing funding, navigating regulations and competition, and staying tuned to new trends.
And it all connects.
Exactly. All of these elements are interconnected and constantly influence each other.
It might feel like a lot to take in, almost daunting.
It can, yeah. But having a solid grasp of these fundamental areas, having this kind of framework we've discussed, will give you a much, much stronger foundation as you embark on your entrepreneurial journey.
So, maybe thinking about all this, given the ever-evolving nature of business and tech, what single aspect we've talked about today do you listening think will be the most critical for your on-startup success? And, importantly, why?
Yeah, that's a great question to reflect on. Take some time with that, maybe even revisit some of these points in the sources if something sparked your interest.
Absolutely. Armed with this deeper understanding, hopefully, that exciting business idea you have now has a much greater chance of becoming a thriving reality. So go out there and make it happen.